28 years at Millhaven State Penitentiary. Maximum security. I did 16 of those years in intake processing. That's the room where they come in. Strip search, fingerprints, Polaroid, medical, property inventory, cell assignment. I could do the whole thing with my eyes closed. Most nights I practically did. This was March 2001. I was working the overnight in intake with C.O. Hendricks. Hendricks had 12 years in by then. Quiet guy, did his job, didn't talk much, which is exactly what you want on a night shift. Intake at night is usually dead. Most transfers come during the day. You get maybe 1 or 2 buses a week after dark, and those are usually emergency moves. Somebody got stabbed at their old facility, somebody's cover got blown, that kind of thing. March 14th, 2001, Thursday. A transport van pulled up to the Sallyport at 2:15 a.m. Just one inmate. Gerald Tate, DOC number 98-4471. Transfer from Burwell Correctional, about 4 hours south. Second-degree murder, serving 25 to life. The paperwork said Burwell signed him out at 9:47 p.m. I remember looking at that and thinking the math didn't work. 4 hours from Burwell puts arrival closer to 2 a.m., but the van logged out of Burwell at 9:47, which means he should have been here by 1:30 at the latest. 45 minutes unaccounted for, but transport paperwork is always wrong. Drivers stop for gas, stop for food. I didn't think about it. The transport COs brought him in, cuffed at the wrists and ankles, belly chain, the whole setup. Standard. They uncuffed him in the intake room and I started the process. Hendricks stood by the door. Tate was cooperative, that's the word. Not friendly, not hostile. Just did what he was told. Arms out for the strip search. Hands flat on the ink pad. Face forward for the Polaroid. Open mouth for medical. He didn't say a word the entire time. Some guys come in talking. Nervous, angry, trying to establish something. Some guys come in crying. Tate just stood there and did what I told him. I've processed maybe 4,000 inmates in 16 years. You forget most of them before the shift is over. But I remember Tate because of his hands. When I pressed his fingers onto the ink pad, his skin was cold. Not cool, cold. Like he'd been holding a bag of ice for 20 minutes. I looked at his hands and they were pale, almost gray. No circulation. I asked him if he was feeling all right. He just looked at me, didn't answer. I told medical to check his vitals. The nurse, I think it was Ray's, she worked nights back then, she took his temperature and blood pressure. Temp was 96.1, low but not alarm bell low. Blood pressure was normal. She cleared him. I finished the paperwork. We assigned him D217, Tier 2, D block, standard single cell. Hendricks walked him down. I heard the cell door close, the lock turn, the electronic bolt click. That sound, you hear it 10,000 times, you stop hearing it. But I remember it that night because after the bolt clicked, the tier went quiet. Not regular quiet. That dead kind of quiet where the fluorescent buzz sounds loud. No snoring, no toilets, no guys mumbling in their sleep. Just nothing. I logged the intake, time 2:47 a.m. Inmate Gerald Tate, DOC 984471, assigned D block, Tier 2, Cell 217. Transfer origin, Burwell Correctional. I clipped the Polaroid to his file and put it in the cabinet. Hendricks came back. I asked him if Tate said anything on the walk. Hendricks shook his head, said the guy walked straight to his bunk, sat down, and stared at the wall. Didn't ask for a blanket, didn't ask for water, didn't ask when commissary was, just sat there. Count came at 4 a.m. I did D-block myself. 214 beds, 214 bodies. Tate was in 217, sitting on his bunk, same position Hendricks described, staring at the wall. Everything was normal. Everything checked out. The paperwork was filed. The count was good. The cell was locked. There was nothing wrong. That's what I told myself for 3 days. 3 days later, March 17th, I was back on nights, sitting in the sergeant's office doing shift reports. Phone rang at 11:40 p.m. Outside line, which was unusual. I picked up. Millhaven Intake, Sergeant Pulaski. Yeah, this is Sergeant Diaz, Burwell Correctional. I'm calling about a transfer. Gerald Tate, 984471. You guys were supposed to pick him up on the 14th. The transport order's been sitting here for 3 days. When are you sending a van? I didn't say anything for a second. I thought maybe he had the wrong facility, wrong inmate, something. Sergeant Tate's already here, I said. He came in on the 14th, 2:15 a.m. I processed him myself. Dead quiet on the other end. Then Diaz laughed. Not a real laugh. That kind of laugh when somebody says something that doesn't make sense and you're waiting for the correction. That's not possible, he said. Tate's in his cell right now, C block, cell 14. I just did count. He's been here all week. Hasn't gone anywhere. I pulled Tate's intake file out of the cabinet. Looked at the Polaroid I took. Looked at the fingerprint card I rolled. Looked at my own handwriting on the intake form. I'm looking at his file right now, I said. I have his prints, his photo. He's in D217. Diaz went quiet again. Then he said, "Hold on." I heard him put the phone down. Footsteps, a door, more footsteps, about 4 minutes of nothing. Then he came back. "I just walked down to C14, he said. His voice was different now, flatter. Tate's on his bunk, reading a magazine. I asked him if he knows anything about a transfer. He said nobody told him anything. I hung up and went to Lieutenant Marsh, told him the situation. Marsh looked at me like I was drunk. I showed him Tate's intake file. He picked up the phone and called Burwell back himself. Same answer. Tate was there, Tate was here, same DOC number, same name. Marsh told me to go to D217 and visually confirm. I walked down the tier. It was past midnight and the block was quiet. That low hum of 200 guys sleeping, the occasional cough, somebody's TV bleeding through the walls. I got to D217 and looked through the food slot. Tate was sitting on the edge of his bunk, same position as intake night, hands on his knees, staring at the wall. He didn't look at me. I keyed the radio. "Lieutenant, I have eyes on the inmate in D217. He's here." Marsh came back. "Copy. Burwell confirms their inmate is also present. I'm requesting a fingerprint comparison." This was 2001. No digital fingerprint database linked between facilities. We had live scan machines, but they weren't networked across the state yet, so we did it the old way. I pulled Tate's intake fingerprint card, walked it to the admin building, and faxed it to Burwell. Burwell faxed back their card for the same DOC number. You know what a faxed fingerprint looks like? Terrible. Grainy, smeared. But even on that crappy fax paper, I could see it. The ridge patterns matched. The whorls, the loops, the arches. Same hands, same guy. Marsh called the warden at home. Warden Briggs came in at 2 a.m. in sweatpants and a polo shirt, which told you how serious it was. Briggs never came in for anything short of a riot or a death. While we waited for Briggs, I went back to Tate's file. I was looking for anything wrong, any discrepancy, and that's when I noticed the Polaroid. The photo I took of Tate on intake night, him standing against the wall in the intake room, but behind him, on the wall, there was a laminated poster. The intake processing flowchart. Every intake room has one. Step-by-step procedure poster. The poster in the photo was the old version. Blue border, 3 columns. We replaced that poster in 1998. The new one had a red border and 4 columns. It had been on that wall for 3 years. I looked up from the photo at the actual wall. Red border, 4 columns. I looked back down at the photo. Blue border, 3 columns. I took that photo 4 days ago, with my own hands, in that room. But the background showed a poster that hadn't existed in that room since 1998. I went to the archive cabinet and pulled old intake records. 1998, flipped through the Polaroids, and there it was. Raymond Doss, number 984471. Same number, same face, same pale skin, same dead eyes looking at the camera. Admitted to Millhaven, March 1998. Doss was serving life for first-degree murder. He was housed in D Block. Raymond Doss cut his wrists in the SHU on March 14, 1999. He'd been dead for 2 years. I brought the Doss file to Marsh's office. Briggs was already there, sitting behind the desk in his sweatpants. I put the two files side by side. Tate's intake from 4 days ago, Doss's intake from 1998. Same face, same Dios number. Briggs looked at the photos for a long time. Then he said, "Bring him to the SU." Hendricks met me at the tier door. We walked to D217 together. The block was dead quiet. That wrong kind of quiet, like the air pressure changed. My boots on the concrete sounded too loud. Hendricks was half a step behind me. I could hear his keys shaking on his belt. He felt it too. We got to D217. I looked through the food slot. Gasps. Empty. The bunk was made. Sheets folded tight, hospital corners, the way they teach at intake. Pillow-centered. No personal items. No commissary. No magazine. No letters. No toothbrush. The cell looked like it had been cleaned for inspection. But the air coming through the food slot was cold. Not March cold. Meat locker cold. I looked at Hendricks. He looked at me. I pulled my keys and found the right one. D-Block Master. My hand was steady. That's what I told myself. My hand was steady. I turned the lock. The bolt pulled back. I pulled the door open. The cell was empty. But the bunk had a body impression. The mattress compressed in the shape of a man sitting on the edge. The pillow had a single dark hair on it. The toilet had water ripples, like it had just been flushed. The air was so cold I could see my breath. And on the wall, above the bunk, scratched into the concrete with something, a fingernail maybe, or the edge of a button. Not deep, but clear enough to read in the fluorescent light. A date, 03/14/1999, March 14th, 1999. The day Raymond Doss died in SHU, 2 years and 3 days before this night. Doss opened his wrists with a sharpened commissary spoon in isolation cell number 4. I backed out of the cell. Hendricks was standing in the tier and his face was wrong. Gray. He had the radio to his ear. "Sarge," he said. His voice was too quiet. "Burwell just called the lieutenant. Their Tate is gone too." I stared at him. "Same time," Hendricks said. "They checked C14 5 minutes ago. Cell's empty. Doors locked. Nobody opened the door. He's just gone." I walked back to the sergeant's office. Briggs was on the phone with Burwell's warden. He hung up and looked at me. "Cell's empty," I said. Briggs nodded. Slow. "What do you want me to write in the report?" I asked. He thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. Longest 10 seconds of my career. "Administrative error," he said. "Transfer paperwork misfiled. Inmate was never received at Millhaven. Burwell inmate released on scheduled date. Records updated accordingly." "Sir, I have his fingerprints. I have his photo. You have a file," Briggs said. "Files get misfiled." He took both folders off his desk, put them in his bottom drawer, and locked it. "Go finish your shift." D217 was marked under maintenance the next morning. Stayed that way 8 months. When they reopened it, the scratch on the wall had been painted over, but if you ran your finger across the paint, you could still feel it. I retired in 2006. Never talked about it. But about 2 years before I left, I pulled up the state DOC database. Just curious. Typed in 98-4471. The number had been deactivated in 2001, marked as deceased administrative closure. That's normal. That's what happens when a DOC number belongs to a dead inmate. But there was a note attached, a transfer flag, from 2004, some facility I'd never heard of, Carver Creek Correctional, up north, an intake record. Gerald Tate, DOC 984471, admitted February 2004, Same name, same number, same face in the database photo, same pale skin. I closed the terminal, didn't tell anyone, didn't look again. But I think about those hands sometimes, how cold they were on the ink pad. And I think about Carver Creek and whether some sergeant up there processed an inmate who didn't talk, who had freezing hands and dead eyes, and whether 3 days later somebody called and said the man was supposed to still be somewhere else. I don't know what Gerald Tate is. I don't know what Raymond Doss became. All I know is the count was right, and the locks were good, and the man was there until he wasn't. And a dead man's number keeps showing up in the system, like a transfer that never ends. The recording